Bare knuckle to Queensberry. Heavyweight boxing began as bare knuckle fighting in the 1700s and continued through the 1800s under rules that allowed wrestling, throws, and prolonged clinching. Champions such as Tom Cribb and Jem Mace fought without gloves, on open ground, with rounds ending only when a man was knocked down. After a fall, the fighter had 30 seconds to return to the scratch mark at the center. If he could not stand and reach the mark, he lost. These contests could last dozens of rounds. John L. Sullivan became the most famous bare-knuckle champion and served as the bridge into the gloved era. His 1889 bout with Jake Kilrain was the last major heavyweight championship fought under London prize ring rules. Soon after, the Queensberry rules, which required padded gloves, timed rounds, and counting knockdowns, were widely adopted. Early 1900s title era. With gloves, timed rounds, and formal refereeing in place, heavyweight boxing entered a period where the public began to recognize a single champion. James J. Corbett became the first modern heavyweight champion when he defeated John L. Sullivan in 1892 using a style based on footwork, distancing, and counterpunching rather than brute force. Corbett's reign showed that boxing skill could overcome brawling strength, and his fights were widely covered in newspapers, helping the sport gain national attention. Corbett eventually lost to Bob Fitzsimmons, an accurate puncher whose technique produced one of the most famous knockouts in boxing history. It became famous because Fitzsimmons won with a single solar plexus punch, at a time when body shots were not widely viewed as fight-ending blows. Corbett had been leading earlier rounds, but the body shot ended the fight. Fitzsimmons then lost to James J. Jeffries, a champion who defended the title repeatedly. Their reigns established the idea of lineage, one champion staying on top until beaten in the ring. Title fights began moving into cities and large venues, and early film and newspapers helped spread the results to wider audiences. Promoters stepped in and marketed the challengers more actively, helping build attendance. By the time Tommy Burns held the belt in the mid-1900s, the public accepted the idea of a single world heavyweight champion, and boxing became a mainstream commercial sport. Jack Johnson and the Color Line. Jack Johnson became the first black heavyweight champion in 1908 when he defeated Tommy Burns in Sydney, Australia. His victory immediately challenged the racial barriers of boxing. For decades, most champions refused to face black contenders, a practice known as the Color Line. Johnson's skill, confidence, and public life made him a lightning rod figure in the United States. Public pressure created a search for a great white hope to defeat Johnson. The most famous attempt came in 1910, when former champion James J. Jeffries returned from retirement to face him. Jeffries weighed around 225 pounds, while Johnson came in at just over 200. Johnson dominated the fight and won by technical knockout. The result caused widespread unrest and highlighted how closely boxing was tied to national and racial identity at the time. Johnson eventually lost the championship in 1915 to Jess Willard in Havana, and the heavyweight title passed to a new era. Dempsey to Lewis. Heavyweight boxing changed rapidly after Jack Johnson. Jack Dempsey's rise in 1919 created a different kind of champion. At 190 pounds, his attacks came out of bobbing head movement known as the Dempsey roll, combined with a drop step that added momentum to his punches. Instead of waiting for openings, he slipped inside and struck first, turning every round into a rush of offense. Stadium crowds grew because knockdowns were common. Gene Tunney replaced Dempsey as champion in 1926 and 1927. He beat Dempsey twice, circling instead of trading, and the second fight included the famous long count, where Tunney rose from a knockdown and still outboxed him. After Tunney retired, the title passed through several contenders until Joe Louis emerged in 1937. Joe Louis defended the title 25 times, a record that still stands. His rematch with Max Schmeling in 1938 turned a boxing match into a political event. Schmeling had beaten him once, and now the fight was framed as America versus Germany on the eve of war. Louis knocked him out in the first round, and Americans celebrated him as a symbol of strength on the eve of war. Marciano to Liston. After World War II, the heavyweight division was rebuilding. Many contenders were past their peak, and fans wanted a steady champion again. Rocky Marciano became that figure in 1952. At about 5'10", he was shorter than most heavyweights, but he compensated with constant pressure and endurance. service. Marciano defended the title 6 times, winning every championship fight by knockout. His bouts with Ezzard Charles and Archie Moore showed how pressure and stamina could beat experience. When Marciano retired undefeated in 1956, the division didn't have an obvious successor. Floyd Patterson won the championship after Marciano's retirement, using speed and quick combinations to stay ahead of opponents. His trilogy with Ingemar Johansson drew major television audiences, but the division still lacked a dominant figure. Sonny Liston changed that. Bigger, longer, and heavier than most challengers, he overwhelmed opponents with power and reach. Liston knocked out Patterson in 1962 and again in 1963, both in the first round. His size and 84-inch reach, combined with 2 first-round knockouts over Patterson, set a new expectation for how physically imposing a champion could be, and he held the title up until he lost it to a young Muhammad Ali in 1964. Ali, Frazier, Foreman. Muhammad Ali's victory over Sonny Liston in 1964 began a new era for heavyweight boxing. The sport was becoming global through television, and Ali's personality, athletic ability, and public stance against the Vietnam War made him a figure of international attention. He fought with speed, reflexes, and timing unusual for a heavyweight, moving constantly and punching from angles. Ali defended the title until his license was suspended in 1967 for refusing military service. During his exile, the championship was held by other fighters, but his absence kept the division unsettled. Joe Frazier became champion in Ali's absence and brought a different style to the division. Frazier fought at a close distance, using constant pressure and a powerful left hook. When Ali was reinstated, their meeting in 1971 was promoted as a contest for the true championship. The fight, later called the Fight of the Century, was broadcast worldwide and demonstrated how heavyweight boxing had become a major cultural event. Frazier won that night, but the rivalry continued through 2 more fights, including the brutal Thrilla in Manila, fought in the heat of over 100 degrees for 14 rounds until Frazier's eyes were swollen shut and his corner stopped the fight. Ali was so exhausted he was ready to quit as well. George Foreman also emerged during this period as a stronger and more explosive puncher than either man. He defeated Frazier in 1973 and became champion, continuing the pattern of dramatic changes at the top of the division. Ali later defeated Foreman in 1974 in the event known as the Rumble in the Jungle, a major international sporting event held in Zaire. Ali, Frazier, and Foreman brought top-level fights and worldwide attention, turning heavyweight boxing into must-watch sports events. Larry Holmes. After Ali and Foreman, the heavyweight division entered a transition period marked by new personalities and changing expectations. Larry Holmes won the championship in 1978 after defeating Ken Norton in a close contest. Holmes had served as Ali's sparring partner, and his experience helped him develop a strategic, patient style. His most effective tool was the left jab, which he used constantly to control distance, limit exchanges, and score points. The jab was a fast, flicking punch thrown straight from the shoulder, snapping out and back before opponents could react. Holmes defended the title throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, facing a wide range of challengers during a time when no single opponent could clearly replace the stars of the previous era. Holmes's reign extended longer than many observers expected. He remained champion for more than 4 years and compiled a long series of successful defenses, including fights against Ernie Shavers, who was known for knockout power, and Jerry Cooney, who generated major media interest. The Cooney fight drew major national attention and packed the Las Vegas venue with one of the biggest live audiences of the era. Despite his success, Holmes never became as widely celebrated as Ali or Frazier. Many fans and writers expected dramatic rivalries or symbolic stories, which did not develop in the same way during Holmes's reign. As Holmes aged, new heavyweights began to emerge, including a young Mike Tyson, whose speed and power signaled a shift toward a more explosive style. Holmes attempted to continue competing at the highest level, but his later fights made clear that a new era was arriving. Foreman resurrection. By the early 1980s, heavyweight boxing was in a period of transition. Muhammad Ali had retired, Joe Frazier was gone, and George Foreman had left the sport entirely. Larry Holmes held the championship and defended it consistently, but the division lacked the dramatic personalities and rivalries that had defined the previous decade. George Foreman had retired in 1977 after a loss to Jimmy Young. The fight left him physically drained and led to a change in his personal life. Foreman devoted himself to religious work, community programs, and family, gaining weight and leaving professional sports behind. For nearly 10 years, he was not part of competitive boxing, and the idea of him returning at an advanced age was regarded as unrealistic. The division appeared to be moving toward younger contenders, with Mike Tyson soon to emerge as a new force. Foreman returned to the ring in 1987 at age 38. His early opponents were journeymen, and the comeback was treated as a curiosity. Foreman, however, kept winning by knockout. His demeanor had also changed. Instead of the intimidating presence from the 1970s, he presented a calmer, approachable personality. Public interest grew as he continued to win, and broadcasters discovered a market for a former champion attempting to climb back into contention. By the early 1990s, he had earned legitimate rankings and fought Evander Holyfield for the title. Although he lost, his performance confirmed he was a real contender. In 1994, Foreman fought Michael Moore. It became one of the most unexpected and influential comebacks in the division. Tyson peaked. Heavyweight boxing entered a new phase with the emergence of Mike Tyson in the mid-1980s. Tyson grew up in the competitive amateur system in New York, where his speed, power, and compact frame were shaped by trainer Cus D'Amato. D'Amato taught Tyson a style based on head movement, diagonal footwork, and explosive counters. He used the peekaboo guard, keeping his hands high and his head moving to slip punches. Tyson's best counter was the slip and rip left hook, a move where he slipped outside a punch and fired back from close range. He also stepped in at angles with shift steps to close distance quickly, where he rapidly shifted angles and switched stances, hopping from orthodox to southpaw, or back, to create openings for power punches. Tyson turned professional in 1985, progressed rapidly through the rankings, and became the youngest heavyweight champion in history when he defeated Trevor Berbick in late 1986. Tyson unified the major belts in 1987 and 1988 by defeating champions such as James Smith and Tony Tucker. His knockout victories over challengers like Larry Holmes, Pinklin Thomas, and Michael Spinks created short, intense events that drew large audiences. Tyson's fights were often promoted as must-see events because spectators expected sudden action. His head movement and knockout power made opponents hesitate before stepping in, and for a few years, it seemed like nobody could challenge him. Tyson's peak ended abruptly in 1990 when he lost to James "Buster" Douglas in Tokyo. Douglas used a disciplined jab, movement, and timely counters to control the fight. In the 10th round, Douglas caught Tyson with a sharp uppercut and followed it with a series of right hands and left hooks. Tyson fell to the canvas and tried to get up, but he couldn't beat the count and the referee waved the fight off. The result was one of the most unexpected upsets in heavyweight history. Tyson later served a prison sentence in the early 1990s, and the division moved on. His comeback was big news, but his first title run had already changed heavyweight boxing. 1990s to 2000s chaos. After Tyson's upset loss in 1990, the heavyweight division entered a period where multiple champions, sanctioning bodies, and promotional interests created constant instability. Evander Holyfield won the title by defeating Buster Douglas later that year and defended it through a series of demanding fights. Holyfield's contests with George Foreman, Riddick Bowe, and Michael Moorer were competitive and demonstrated how evenly matched the top fighters had become. Their trilogy became one of the defining rivalries of the decade. Bowe won the first, Holyfield returned to win the second, and their rematch was interrupted when a parachutist crash-landed in the ring. Lennox Lewis emerged as another major champ, first through the British and European systems, and then by defeating top American heavyweights. With trainer Emmanuel Stewart, he relied on a long jab and straight right hand, fighting from range and keeping risk to a minimum. He unified titles, but progress was constantly interrupted by sanctioning bodies. After Bowe beat Holyfield, he refused to fight Lewis and threw the WBC belt into a trash can, so the title changed hands without a fight. Later, Lewis was stripped of the WBA belt for choosing a different opponent, and the belt was contested by others. These decisions kept the division fragmented, even when Lewis was clearly the best fighter. From 1996 to 2002, Mike Tyson was back in big fights, but the division still had several champions at once. TV networks and promoters pushed for exclusive deals, which kept some of the best matchups from happening. Klitschko era. The heavyweight picture changed in the early 2000s when the division shifted toward Eastern Europe and the Klitschko brothers became the main figures. Vitaly and Vladimir were huge, well-conditioned, and came from strong amateur systems, which immediately stood out in a division that had been unstable. Vitaly won his first title in 1999 and fought with a granite chin and high volume, pushing opponents backward and controlling range. Vladimir took the opposite approach: a long jab, a heavy straight right, and a careful game plan designed to take as few risks as possible. The Klitschko era lined up with better training, nutrition, and a wave of international talent. A lot of new heavyweights had deep amateur resumes, often from former Soviet programs. Vladimir's gold medal at the 1996 Olympics became a symbol of that shift. The brothers defended their belts against a wide list of challengers: Chris Bird's mobility, Samuel Peters' power, David Hayes' speed, and won consistently. Their fights rarely turned into brawls. They won by controlling distance, smothering counterattacks, and shutting fights down before anything chaotic could happen. Because of that, the division became predictable. Most nights, a Klitschko walked in as the favorite and walked out with the belts. The biggest crowds were in Europe, especially Germany, where they filled arenas and even football stadiums. Vladimir's long run finally ended in 2015 when Tyson Fury outboxed him over 12 rounds, making the fight awkward and slow, but effective enough to take the title. That result marked the start of a new generation and closed a decade in which the belts usually stayed in one family. 2010's heavyweights revival. After Vladimir Klitschko's loss to Tyson Fury in 2015, the heavyweight division reopened. For the first time in many years, no single champion controlled the belts, and several contenders were positioned to shape the new landscape. Deontay Wilder won a version of the world title earlier in 2015 and defended it with a style based on range, power, and sudden counters. Anthony Joshua emerged from the British boxing system with Olympic success in 2012 and drew large stadium audiences soon after turning professional. These fighters, along with other contenders, helped restore public attention to the heavyweight class after a period when many of the most popular events took place in lower weight divisions. Joshua's fights in the United Kingdom filled major stadiums, producing attendance numbers that had not been seen in decades. Broadcasters developed international streaming rights, allowing fans worldwide to follow title fights. Wilder's knockouts created highlight moments that circulated rapidly online, often reaching audiences before official broadcasts. The division no longer depended on a single region or champion. Instead, major events took place in multiple countries. Talks between Wilder, Joshua, and other champions often fell apart, so the big unification fights never happened. Fans kept waiting, and promoters acted like the matchups were just around the corner. More big athletes entered the division, and interest stayed high. This period ended when Tyson Fury returned to the top, and a new set of rivalries began: Fury, Wilder, Joshua. The next phase of the division centered around three heavyweights whose careers overlapped but rarely converged in a single championship event. Tyson Fury returned to boxing after a long absence and became a central figure when he challenged Deontay Wilder in 2018. Fury fought with mobility, feints, and counterpunching, making him an unusual heavyweight for his size. Wilder relied on a powerful right hand and fought with a style built around sudden knockouts. Their first bout ended in a draw, highlighted by Fury rising from a knockdown late in the fight. The result created widespread interest in a rematch and established both men as central to the division. Anthony Joshua continued to fill stadiums in the United Kingdom and held multiple title belts during this period. His fights drew significant media coverage, and his matches against Vladimir Klitschko and later Joseph Parker reinforced his status as a champion. However, his loss to Andy Ruiz Jr. in 2019 demonstrated how competitive the division had become. Joshua regained the belts in the rematch, but the setback showed that no one fighter could fully control the division. Fury and Wilder fought again in 2020, and Fury won by stoppage. Their third fight in 2021 was a slugfest, where Fury finished it. Talks for a unification bout with Joshua never worked out because of contracts, promoters, and TV deals, and there was no undisputed champion. Usyk, undisputed era. Heavyweight boxing changed again when Alexander Usyk entered the division from cruiserweight after winning titles and becoming undisputed champion in that weight class. His move to heavyweight occurred during a period when size and strength were considered the main standards for elite fighters. Usyk relied instead on footwork, angles, and southpaw timing. His debut fights at the new weight showed that he could adapt against larger opponents. When he challenged Anthony Joshua in 2021, Usyk used constant movement, quick jabs, and counterpunching to reduce Joshua's reach advantage and won the championship by decision. The rematch occurred in 2022, and Usyk demonstrated the same strategic approach while adjusting to Joshua's changes. He maintained rhythm, used lateral movement, and landed clean combinations in the later rounds. The victories established Usyk as a heavyweight champion who relied on technical skill rather than size. His performances showed that smaller heavyweights could compete at the highest level. Usyk later faced Tyson Fury for the undisputed championship in 2024. The bout brought together two contrasting styles. Fury relied on reach, strength in the clinch, and unpredictable tactic, while Usyk continued to use movement and accuracy. Usyk won by a close decision, becoming the first undisputed heavyweight champion of the four-belt era. Usyk's achievement showed that a fighter from a lighter division could move up, adjust, and succeed at the highest level. Saudi mega events era. Heavyweight boxing changed again in the early 2020s when big events began moving to Saudi Arabia. Major promotion and government-supported investment created opportunities for large purses and high-profile matchups. Events were staged in new venues with extensive production budgets, such as the Diriyah Arena, which hosted the 2022 rematch between Tyson Fury and Dillian Whyte. Heavyweights from multiple regions were brought together on the same cards, combining long-running champions, former title holders, and rising contenders. Matchups that had been difficult to arrange because of broadcast rights or promotional contracts suddenly became possible when organizers were willing to cover expenses and guarantee revenue. Francis Ngannou, a former mixed martial arts heavyweight champion, crossed over to boxing and got high-profile fights against two of the biggest names, Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua. Against Fury, Ngannou entered at a significant weight disadvantage, but was backed by major promotional support. The fight was billed as a clash of boxing tradition versus MMA-bred power. Shortly afterward, Ngannou was paired with Joshua in a separate event, giving him another shot at a top-level boxer. Ngannou's matches grabbed attention, but Saudi Arabia was also putting on the biggest title fights. Starting with the 2019 Ruiz-Joshua rematch in Diriyah. It took place in a custom-built 15,000-seat open-air arena in Diriyah, assembled in under 2 months with almost 300 tons of steel. Joshua regained the belts in a tactical fight, and the success of that show encouraged more promoters to view Saudi Arabia as a new home for heavyweight boxing.